Seth Moulton, a former Marine captain, confronted Pete Hegseth, a man who has never held a combat command despite repeatedly claiming that accountability has returned. But when Moulton pressed him with tough questions, Hegseth avoided taking responsibility and shifted the blame like a child. That is not leadership. It reflects a dangerous level of incompetence at the highest ranks of the Pentagon, placing American service members and the nation's security at greater risk under the Trump administration.
How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but...
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired?
Seth Moulton is far from an ordinary member of Congress. As a former Marine captain, he led troops into Baghdad, completed 4 combat deployments in Iraq, and served directly under General Petraeus. He knows the realities of war, the cost of sacrifice, and the qualities that define true leadership. Now, he is using that first-hand battlefield experience to challenge Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. But before you see Hegseth begin to unravel under Moulton's questioning, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah. What was the classification marking? Because
again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
That's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General.
Have U.S.-flagged commercial ships resumed safe passage through the Red Sea? Let's look at the results. Hegseth's so-called successful campaign against the Houthis cost American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, with nearly $1 billion spent on expensive missiles, and what was achieved in return? Nothing. Not a single U.S.-flagged commercial ship has safely transited the Red Sea since the operation. The shipping routes remain effectively paralyzed. Even so, Hegseth confidently described the mission as a major success. When confronted about the lack of results, he quickly shifted the blame to the previous administration, the same familiar excuse that has been repeated for years. According to this critique, it reflects the classic Trump-era leadership approach: claim no responsibility and blame everyone else. Hegseth constantly insists that accountability has returned, yet his own actions suggest the exact opposite. He expects accountability from others while refusing to accept it himself. As American taxpayers pay for billion-dollar failures and U.S. troops continue facing unnecessary risks, the Secretary of Defense remains focused on political point scoring. This is not leadership.
And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, There were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me or not?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm just asking if it applies to you.
very successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
I'm just asking about
we
I reclaim my
actually put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask about military vessels. I asked
which would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
how many commercial vessels?
transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have?
It is incompetence fueled by arrogance, and it is putting America's global standing at risk. And what comes next may be the most alarming development of all, the systematic removal of America's top military leaders. Hegseth could not even recall how many generals and admirals he had dismissed. When asked to provide just one reason, only a single justification, he came up with nothing. There were no performance concerns, no strategic rationale, and no clear explanation, only the claim that they serve at the pleasure of the president. This is not leadership. It is portrayed as a dangerous political purge unfolding at the highest levels of the U.S. military. Removing experienced generals without a clear cause, particularly during an active conflict with Iran, is presented as both reckless and destabilizing. It undermines morale, strips away valuable institutional knowledge, and weakens the nation's defense. According to this critique, loyalty under the Trump administration appears to carry more weight than competence. Pete Hegseth is turning the Pentagon into a political battleground rather than a force focused on military readiness, and in the end, the American people and the nation's troops are the ones who will bear the consequences.
Well, would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
for
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer is
ships
zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why.
That we
and
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want
Why
better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
According to the Washington Post and multiple defense officials, Pete Hegseth has dismissed or pushed out more than 20 senior generals and admirals in a relatively short period. Among those removed was Army Chief of Staff Randy George, a widely respected officer and Biden appointee who still had more than a year remaining in his 4-year term. Many of the officers affected were highly experienced military leaders who had served with distinction under multiple presidents. Their abrupt departures have fueled growing concern and uncertainty throughout the armed forces. Critics argue this is not meaningful reform, but a political purge that places loyalty to Trump above competence and experience, an especially troubling development during an active conflict with Iran. So what are the real consequences of this purge? What's the impact of that, especially in the middle of an ongoing war with Iran?
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the Army's top officer, Randy George, asking him to put in his retirement papers and step aside effective immediately, according to a DOD official. George is a Biden nominee who had more than a year left in his 4-year term as Army Chief of Staff. His departure comes as the Washington Post reports 2 other Army generals have been shown the door. That's according to 2 defense officials who spoke on condition of anonymity. Want to bring in Washington Post Pentagon reporter Dan Lamothe. Dan, what's your understanding of what's happening here?
Secretary Hegseth has had an interest in kind of turning over the senior military leadership for some time here. He's been very pointed about doing so. He has not always explained why he's doing so. And there's a lot of frustration within the Army over that, particularly as not only these 3 gentlemen, but also several other names last year had presumed promotions that were blocked by Secretary Hegseth. In some cases, they would have become 4-star generals or taken on different 4-star general roles. Those positions also were blocked. So it's kind of a part of a larger pattern here.
Yeah, I was going to say none of this is happening in a vacuum because Hegseth has now removed more than a dozen senior military leaders from their positions, including all but 2 Joint Chiefs. You can see their names and faces on the screen.
I think the impact is cumulative over time. The military is structured so that any one leader can usually be replaced, and within a relatively short period it can continue moving forward. But when you remove large numbers of leaders across multiple branches and several members of the Joint Chiefs, the effects begin to add up. You start asking how much institutional knowledge has been lost and how many critical relationships these generals had with allies, partners, and even adversaries that could help influence events during a crisis. There's a reason experience matters, particularly in positions like these when the stakes are so high. And the stakes are incredibly high given the developments we've been reporting over the past hour. What are you hearing from your Pentagon sources about the search operation for an American pilot in Iran? Do you have any indication of what caused that aircraft to go down? At this point, I don't. I would point out that earlier in the conflict we had fighter jets go down, but in those cases they landed safely in Kuwait and everyone survived. This situation is very different because it happened inside Iran, where hostile forces could potentially be pursuing personnel on the ground. Right now, there's an active crisis focused on recovering those individuals as quickly as possible." End quote. As you just heard, critics argue that while an active conflict with Iran continues, Pete Hegseth is dismantling the military's senior leadership. Losing dozens of experienced generals and admirals is presented as far more than a disruption. It is described as a serious national security concern. Institutional knowledge, vital relationships with allies, and well-established chains of decision-making are all being weakened. These leaders are not interchangeable. They form a crucial part of the nation's defense structure. According to this criticism, this is not reform but a political purge aligned with the Project 2025 agenda, placing unquestioning loyalty to Donald Trump ahead of military expertise and professional competence. The Trump administration is accused of treating the Pentagon as a political institution where ideological loyalty outweighs military effectiveness and the safety of American troops. At a time of growing global instability, critics argue that these actions are undermining military readiness, placing service members at greater risk, and weakening national security. Seth Moulton did more than question Pete Hegseth during the hearing. According to this commentary, he spoke on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of American service members who now face the consequences of what it describes as ineffective leadership. It points to a Secretary of Defense who could not say how many generals he had removed, is accused of mishandling classified information through a private messaging app, oversaw nearly $1 billion in spending with little measurable outcome, and dismissed experienced military leaders during an active conflict. The commentary argues that these actions represent a genuine threat to national security. According to this critique, the Trump administration is placing politics ahead of the safety of America's service members, choosing loyalty over competence and chaos over preparedness. What are your thoughts on this alleged purge? Share your opinion in the comments below, and if you want more in-depth political analysis like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.